What's up? Welcome into our first ever Hoge Jahns Bears mock draft edition. Little mini pod here for you in the middle of the week ahead of the NFL Combine. Johnsy, we made the picks.
I don't like the grades that Pat Norton gave us, but I guess we have to talk about it. You kind of got him with that threat to put him in a room with Carm or Braggs. Either way works.
Yeah, well, I have my ways, but let's just jump into this. The full mock draft is available, by the way, for CHGO diehards on allchgo.com, and our colleague Patrick Norton did grade the mock draft, evidently very well. I think he did a great job. Let's jump into the picks, John. So we both went with a defensive tackle, number 25 overall. That's where the Bears sit in the first round. But we went with different ones.
I went with Lee Hunter from Texas Tech, and you went with Caleb Banks from Florida. So here's the question I have for you. Were you kind of wrestling with I was wrestling with the idea of who to take? This could be a good spot to be in for the Bears at number 25 if they want to target a defensive tackle.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I kind of wanted to go edge, but it's kind of a weird spot with the edge rushers. The top guys probably off the board. There's some tweeners, maybe some guys that don't necessarily exactly fit Dennis Allen's height, length requirements. So it seemed like the value was better with the defensive tackles. And talking on Caleb Banks, who I went with, this is a very interesting prospect. I think next week at the Combine, the medicals will be huge for him. Now, he had a foot injury late 2024, carried over to 2025, but I love that he came back and played at the end of last season when the coach was fired at Florida, and there was really not a ton of reason to come back. He could have set his sights on the draft. That tells me he loves football. He looked pretty good at the Senior Bowl, looked healthy at the Senior Bowl. So as long as this wasn't some type of chronic foot injury, which is always scary with a 335-pound man, and they feel like he's healed, then I think this is more like a top 10, top 15 player that you could be getting later in the first round.
So with Lee Hunter, I'm thinking of the run game first. I understand that you want pass rush, but if I'm looking at free agency, I think the Bears can address some of their pass rush concerns, especially with some veteran defensive ends. So Lee Hunter would fit in and be an immediate replacement for Andrew Billings. I think his length is very disruptive. He's listed at 6'3", 320 pounds. Peter Woods is someone I considered also. I don't know if he had thoughts on him. I saw Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network picked him for the Bears in his most recent mock draft. I don't know if that feels late or I know boards will vary at this point, but Peter Woods would be another disruptive option with more pass rush skills that I would consider at number 25.
Yeah, the boards are kind of all over the place, but there seems to be this does seem to be sort of a sweet spot for one of these first round talents at defensive tackle to fall to the Bears in the first round. Let's go to the second round now. Pick 57 is where the Bears sit in the second round. You went safety.
A.J. Halsey from LSU, and you went the Northwestern offensive lineman.
Yes.
Caleb Tiernan.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's like every 3 or 4 years, Northwestern sends a really good offensive lineman into the NFL. True. This is that guy this year, Caleb Tiernan. Now, he's not going to be Rashawn Slater, top half of the first round, or Peter Skoronski. However, there's still similar arm length questions here. Now, I think Tiernan's probably a little bit lengthier. Now, we'll find out next week when he gets measured at the Combine, and that'll determine a lot of this. Different thoughts on Tiernan. I know our guy Fran Duffy has him more as a first-round guy. However, I did reach out to him, and I said, hey, do you think there's a chance he could fall to 57? He said, yeah, actually, I think there's a decent chance. So Duffy likes him a little bit more.
Because of his arm length, you think?
Well, I don't think we know yet. But I think he might not be part of the issue too. Is he's 6'7". He's almost too tall to shift inside the guard. If like Skoronski was like, well, if it doesn't work out outside, he's going to be a dominant guard. It's 6'7", especially with Caleb not being the tallest of quarterbacks. I would be a little bit worried about him having to be a guard in the future. So similar to Ozzie Trapillo, taller lineman, offensive tackle. He I think could fall back in the second round, be available for the Bears. Now, big difference here, though. Trapillo had the right side experience, struggled at left tackle, whereas Tiernan's got experience on both and has looked good at both spots. So I think as a fallback, the floor is swing tackle, whereas I think with his experience and especially on the left side, Johnsy, I think he could actually help fill the gap the Bears might have next year at left tackle and be a serviceable plug-and-play starter at left tackle, even as a rookie.
So with A.J. Halsey, he is, let's get this right, he is Fran Duffy's number 46 overall player and number 3 safety. To me, it comes down to what type of investments you want to make at this position. As we talked with Matt Bowen earlier this week, there are some good free agent safeties available, and safety can be a position you wait on. But I think the Bears might strike fast just by retaining Kevin Byard. So that could be a pretty good contract, and I understand why the Bears would want to do that. So to me, it makes sense not to sign another safety, but to potentially draft one as your next starter. So Halsey, he's violent, he's downhill, he's a good tackler, and he's got a lot of ball production in college. So I think he could be an immediate starter in that strong safety role. I know they're interchangeable in Dennis Allen's defense, but I think his skill set and a lot of other safeties would mix and match with Kevin Byard really well, especially if you want to target one early in the draft.
All right, on to the third round pick. 89 is where the Bears are slotted. And the way you got this, you're going 3 straight defensive picks.
Yes. You know what I'm saying? So I went with pick 89, Malachi Lawrence, pass rusher from Central Florida. In round 4, I went to Cario Davis, cornerback from Washington. That might be.
Well, I was going all the way back to your first round pick. So
okay,
you went,
all right.
Because you went
all
defense, So if you're going to keep going to the 4th round, you're all defense.
No.
Until the 7th round.
There you go.
That doesn't count.
It matters.
Yeah.
I just think the investments have to be made there after last year. Am I crazy to think that? Like last year you went Colson Loveland, Luther Burden, Ozzie Trapillo, Shamar Turner. Like your first 3 picks were offensive players. We know where the Bears' concerns are. They're up front defensively. Yes, left tackle stands out to me. It's going to stand out just like it stood out to you with your second round selection. But maybe there's a free agent tackle that can be added to that mix. And you run it back with Karan Amagaji, Theo Benedict. Like that, I might be okay with that. The Bears pass rush, the Bears run defense has to get better. And I think safety's part of that conversation too.
Absolutely. So you go Malachi Lawrence with an edge rusher in the 3rd. I'm going to go with a linebacker, a potential replacement for Tremaine Edmonds, Keyshawn Elliott from Arizona State. He is I would just say one of these smarter linebackers that you could tell is well studied before games. He reads the run really well, has good instincts, seems well prepared for every single game, and he fires downhill. Also had the green dot at Arizona State, so he seems like one of these guys that's going to be a defensive leader who's winning with instincts, and I think his 40 time next week in Indy will be huge for him to see how high he could actually climb in this draft just based on the speed alone. And we know the Bears need to add speed on defense.
Malachi Lawrence, 6'4", 247, 33.5-inch arms. Those were his measurements at the East-West Shrine game. I think he's close to fitting the physical profile that Dennis Allen wants from his pass rushers. He had 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles last year. So the production is there at Central Florida. And again, the physical profile is something you have to consider when you look at the edge rushers for Dennis Allen's defense.
We'll go through the final rounds a little bit quicker, but in round 4, I did go offense again here. I just think we can't ignore the fact that Ben Johnson is still the head coach, and I think he's got a ton of influence, if not the most influence, at this point. And so there is a guy named Desmond Reed who Fran Duffy, his comp for Desmond Reed, running back out of Pittsburgh, is Tariq Cohen. And I love this. I love adding a piece. Now, he's actually a taller Tariq Cohen. He's undersized, but he's 5'8". But similar type of player. Quickness, right? He's a polished route runner already. So he's a type of guy that you could take running routes out of the backfield. You could also go line him up in the slot, have them run option routes. I think adding a piece like that to Ben Johnson's offense could already open up a lot of things on top of what Colston Loveland's already doing at tight end. You're talking about creating a lot of mismatches and making it really hard to guard the entire field if you're a defense. So I think Desmond Reed, just as a running back option, adding to that group just gives them a little bit of a different element, a little bit more of a home run element that they might not have right now.
So as I briefly mentioned earlier, I went cornerback in round 4, Takario Davis from Washington, also played at Arizona. He is 6'4" and 200 pounds. Does that sound like a current Bears cornerback about to enter free agency?
Yeah, it sounds like Nishan Wright.
There you go. Good in man coverage. He's got those long arms. I just think cornerback, as much as we argue about safety, when to draft the safety, when to sign a safety, it requires some investment as well. Wright's going to hit free agency. Tyreek Stevenson is entering the 4th year, the final year of his rookie contract, has yet to become a full-time starter. Jalen Johnson is coming off a season where he was never healthy after core muscle surgery. Cornerback requires some investment. I just don't think it's going to happen in free agency just because you have a lot of money already committed to Jalen Johnson.
So in the 5th round, we both go defense here. I've been ignoring edge for too long, but there's an edge rusher out of Texas, Trey Moore, that I really like. Now, he at some point the Bears just can't be held too rigid to this idea that they need tall, lengthy defensive linemen. That's great, but we're in the 5th round now. I like Moore just because of the relentless motor that he plays with, and he has a deep bag of pass rush moves to go along with it. Needs to be better against the run. I think that's one of the reasons why he might be available this later in the draft. But I look at this guy as, I'm not saying he's Max Crosby, but Max Crosby was similar to me as he fell, I think, to the 4th round, right? Where they just overlooked some things and didn't pay attention to enough to the fact that he just plays really, really hard all the time and is a polished pass rusher. And that's what I see in Trey Moore out of Texas.
I went with Missouri defensive tackle Chris McClellan in round 5. He had 5 sacks and 7 tackles for loss in his last year at Missouri. He's listed at 6'4", 323 pounds. We'll see what the combine numbers say. In general, I think defensive line, whether it's pass rusher, maybe some versatile players, this is going to be a position targeted by the Bears in a variety of different ways. Why? Grady Jarrett and Dayo Odeyingbo's contracts. The Bears can get out of them in an affordable way after this season. So if they're not producing, if Grady Jarrett is showing more signs of wear and tear at this point in his career, and Dayo Odeyingbo struggles to get back from his injury, I think defensive line will be heavily addressed by the Bears in some form this offseason.
All right, round 7. The Bears have 2 picks right now if they stick with those 2 picks. So we'll double up here. The 2 players I went with here in the 7th round, Jalen Catalon, a safety out of Mizzou, who I think is really a fascinating player in this draft because I think his talent alone in most years would get him drafted way, way higher than the 7th round. But he's already going to be a 25-year-old rookie. He was in college for 7 years, and he's got a lengthy injury history. So this is a player, Johnsy, who will probably be off a lot of teams' draft boards completely. But here in the 7th round, you're maybe not drafting here to get a player that's going to be in Chicago for a long, long time. But if you can get the length of the rookie contract out of Jalen Catalon, I think he's a player who can play quickly and sort of fill that CJ Gardner-Johnson type role where he's got the versatility to play in the slot, play safety. He's a little bit undersized, but he fires downhill. He can run sideline to sideline. He's just really a fascinating, explosive player. Again, big if, can he stay healthy at the next level? He's older, but we're talking about a 7th round pick. I'm willing to take a flyer on Catalon this late in the draft. And then finally, I always like adding offensive line depth as much as I can. I think actually one player we never talked about, like basically all year, Ryan Bates, his contract is expiring. Center depth is actually an underrated need for the Bears. So Jager Burton out of Kentucky, he's played center, he's played guard, he's probably projects as a swing interior swing guy in the NFL at the next level as a backup. And so I'm adding Burton here as my last pick.
So my 2 picks in round 7, again, these will all be finalized once the comp pick and selections are finalized and then announced by the NFL. So I went with tight end for Michigan State, Jack Felling is my first pick. And then Penn State offensive tackle, Nolan Rucci. Just tight end is a position I think that Ben Johnson will always look at extensively just because of how much he wants to play 12 personnel, 13 personnel. You're not going to find Colston Loveland like players every single year. You may not even find Cole Kmet like players every single year. Those are your number 1 and number 2 tight ends. They have immense value on this roster. But after them, do you re-sign Durham Smythe? Do you keep Stephen Carlson? I think tight end will be a position that will be addressed in some capacity this offseason. Maybe it comes late in the draft where you take a swing on a player you could develop and fit in to your system because of his physical traits. Nolan Rucci, he is a massive offensive tackle. He is listed at 6'8". You're just taking swings on development at this point. Offensive line requires continuous investment. Find those players, fit them in. Maybe you hit a home run with someone.
Well, those are the picks. You tell us how we did. I'm sure you hate them and you love them, depending on who you are.
Pat Norton gave you an A-. I got a B. I will threaten him before mock draft 2.0.
He's a generous grader there. People probably listening to this are like, F. You guys get Fs.
A safety in the second round. Yes, a safety in the second round. Dennis Allen has a track record of taking safeties early.
There you go. Check out the full mock draft, allcsgo.com. It's available for diehards. It includes some highlights in there, some clips to go with the players, and Fran Duffy's big board. His entire draft database is available with all of our diehard content. I'm telling you, that alone pays for itself. You can get in right now with code JAHNS, JAHNS, $36 for your first year as a CSGO diehard. You also get a free shirt. I'm telling you, Fran Duffy's draft guide is so in-depth.
Worth it.
I can tell you it helped us a lot as we just did this mock draft. Even better, Fran's going to join us on Thursday's episode of Hoge Jahns. We'll have him grade our mock drafts too. So we'll maybe he'll give you a better grade than Pat did. And I don't know, since he's our draft expert, it might mean a little bit more. I don't know.
Throw Pat on the bus. You're definitely not getting a better grade than me next time.
Yeah, that's probably true. All right. That's all available for you. Allchgo.com. And Fran Duffy is going to join us to go even more in depth on Thursday's episode of Hoge Jahns. We'll talk.